How can we overcome fear? How can one overcome fear? How can we overcome fear of terrible things? How can each of us overcome our fears of terrible things happening? This is so pertinent right now because many things are happening in our world that can spark fears and that can build fears. There are fires on the West Coast. There are hurricanes and floods in the Southeast. There is racial tension throughout our nation right now. There's a very contested election coming up. There is a pandemic that some people think isn't happening, or they think that it's over and they're not taking the precautions and it's spreading. And then just the regular fears that people come across all day, every day are also happening. So this question of how we can overcome fear of terrible things happening is the same teaching about how we overcome fear at all. Whether it's fear of something smaller, more immediate happening, something happening way off in our future. You know, people have lost jobs, they've lost homes, they've lost loved ones. Sometimes the fear of those things happening can just stop us in our tracks. And the way to overcome fear is to find a place within us where we allow ourselves to feel the fear. The feeling of fear is a feeling, and it will pass and change. And it might grow from irritation to huge fears, but if we allow it to move through us, we can watch it move through us. We can notice what's underneath it. Is there grief under the fear? Is there anger under the fear? What is it that's under the fear? And instead of trying to figure it out with our minds, we can allow ourselves gently and lovingly to experience our feelings and know that as we do, they will pass. They will pass and that they'll change. They will shift. And if we imagine surrounding that fear with love and with gratitude, right now, if we're feeling fear, and we can surround it with things that we are grateful for right now, because fear is often something about the future. Whether it's a few moments from now or months from now, we're fearing what's going to happen later. But our gratitude is in this moment, right here and right now. And one of those first gratitudes can be gratitude for being emotional beings that can feel our feelings and not to be scared of feeling our feelings, right? But to be able to be grateful for that. We can be grateful for whatever amount of health we have. We can be grateful that we are alive and that we are attending this, that we may have written this question, and even if we didn't write it, it may speak to us. We can be full of gratitude for the heat that we have if it's cold outside, for the air conditioning we may have if it's hot outside, for the buildings surrounding us if the weather is bad outside, if the smoke from the fires is bad outside. Be grateful for everything that you have in this moment. And as we can truly do that, Look around the room, look at the space, be grateful for every piece of cloth that we have on our bodies. Be grateful for glasses that we have on our face, if that's the case. As we are grateful for each of these things, it brings us more into the present moment. It brings us more into a loving moment. And we can begin to feel that love along with the gratitude. And we can surround that fear around any situation that we're afraid of. Fear of terrible things happening. We can surround that fear with gratitude, with love. Love ourselves so much. Even though we're feeling fear, we know that we are a loving being and that we are part of a loving universe and that we are part of a loving life. And as we begin to feel that, we may feel the fear begin to reduce, begin to let go of its hold on us a little bit. So how to overcome any fear is through love and gratitude. And it's a practice. We need to keep practicing it, from every small anxiety to the bigger fears. Be able to allow ourselves to feel the fear and not take it too seriously, not have it overshadow everything in this moment. When we feel the love, when we feel that greater love, it's actually empowering. It's empowering us to stay connected with that greater love. And as that becomes our source for all things, it's the source of all light, it's the source of air, it's the source of our breath, it's the source of our thoughts, our feelings, our bodies. When we can get in touch with that, we breathe a little bit better. As we breathe a little bit better, then we can let go of the fear a little bit. And when we learn that we can do that, we can practice it more and more and more until we feel like we can overcome the fear. That the fear itself has no power over us. It is an illusion of power. Those who want power over us love to feed the fear and to keep people in fear and to keep people divided from themselves, from their spiritual selves, from each other. And when we realize that, and we realize that love and unity and beingness is greater than fear, that's the secret. That's the superpower. Next question. How do I learn? How do I learn to speak my truth? How do I learn my truth? How do I learn to be in touch with my truth? How do I know what is true for me? How do I know my truth? And in that moment, when I know my piece of the truth, when I know what's true for me, how do I learn to speak it? How do I learn to risk speaking my truth and not worrying about rejection? Because I know that if I can let go of my worry about rejection and speak my truth, that I will be happier that I will be more aligned with my truth, that I will be more comfortable in my body, that I will be more at ease with my emotions, and that I will be more able to hear other people and to hear their piece of the truth without my fear of rejecting them, right? Because if I'm worried about people rejecting me, sometimes I'm worried about rejecting parts of myself, or I'm worried about rejecting parts of them or their piece of the truth and not wanting to hear it. So when we know that we have our piece of the truth, we have our piece that we are able to understand at that moment and find the best words that we can for it in that moment. And how, at that moment, to have the courage, right? The courage to speak and say our truth. And we do that by taking that risk. First, we speak our truth to ourselves, then to ourselves in the mirror, and then to people that we know that probably agree with us because we don't think they'll reject us, but we get used to saying, here's something I know to be true in this moment, or here's a piece of the truth about me that you may or may not know, but I trust that you will not reject me, so I want to share this truth with you. So we start there. And then as you do that and you become more comfortable, right, in comfort, then we're able to step out of our comfort zone, because taking a risk means that we step out of our comfort zone, that we reach out of our comfort zone, knowing that deep within us, we accept our piece of the truth and we want to share it with others. Others want to hear it. We want to hear from them. We want to hear many of the voices so that we can put the puzzle pieces together, not to figure things out, but to be one of many voices as our voices unify. So the way to learn to speak my truth more often without worrying about rejection is to get in touch with your truth first. How do we know what's true for us? Because it feels like relief to say it. We find ourselves exhaling. We find ourselves saying, yes, that's it. That's my piece of the truth. That for me is true in this moment. I may not know what's true for someone else. They might not totally agree with my truth. They might not be wanting to hear my truth, willing to hear it without argument. And I need to be able to accept all of that and know what to do inside of me, to know how to surround me, my words, my truth with love. So that even if it seems like someone is going to reject or disagree, that I'm surrounding it with love, so I don't take it personally and it doesn't hurt my feelings. And sometimes someone has really heard us deeply. They've heard our truth. They just simply don't agree with it. And we need to be able to hear that sometimes. Or they agree with part of it, with a piece of our truth. So as we realize that it's not so polar opposite, right? But we all have a piece of what's been happening. It's like with a something that happens at an intersection. People will often talk about, if a car accident happens, but just the idea being that something happens where four roads come together at an intersection, and people are standing on four different corners. Right? Maybe they're even taping it with their cameras. People do that these days. They have their phone, they take a camera, they take a video, they film what's happening from their corner. And later, when you look at each of those films, they're each from a different perspective. but they are each true from their perspective. Then the personal level, going out of our comfort zone, is interpreting, is remembering it if we didn't videotape it, right? Having our perspective, and then knowing that it's our perspective, that it's our interpretation of our perspective. So we can know our piece of the truth. But when we take all of those together, we are getting more of the whole story that is happening. And our piece is just one piece of the truth. So one way to learn to speak our truth is to not be attached to it being the only truth. And we can do it more often without worrying about rejection when we surround it with love, when we encourage ourselves to go out of our comfort zone, knowing that's when we're going to learn and we're going to grow. Now for the next question. How can I release my fears? Right? Another question about fear. How can I release my fears based on past religious teachings? I have fears that are sparked by, that are fed by, that are based on past religious teachings that I don't even believe anymore. But how can I release my fears from those and happily and courageously embrace the spiritual beliefs I have today? And this person says, which are based on Unity's 5 principles, right? And no matter what they're based on, how can I let go of the teachings, the religious teachings I was raised with, if they're no longer a match for me, if they are no longer a piece of my truth, if they felt not in alignment with me, if they felt too strict or too loose, too tight or too open, they just weren't a fit for me anymore. How can I release my fear based on past religious teachings, especially if those teachings were based on fear and based on keeping me in line and in agreement with something that I no longer now believe? So to find our piece of the truth, the word true is not saying there is only one truth. It is saying what's true for me in this moment. And by truth, we mean alignment. What is aligning with me, my head, my spirit, my heart, my body, my emotions, my being? What's in alignment with me? When we look at the word true, as far as bicycles, and Eugene's a big bicycle city, so this is what I come up with. But when we look at the word true, it's about truing the wheels of the bicycle with a special tool to get them into alignment so that everything works perfectly in the roundness of the wheel and it's balanced. It is well balanced so that we can move forward in our life. So we look at knowing what is our piece of the truth is so that we can get in alignment and feel well balanced and move on with our life and with our spiritual beliefs. So how can I release my fears based on past religious teachings? So even though these fears are based on past teachings that were probably based on fear. It was fear of the future, right? As we said before, fear is always based on future events. Bad things will happen to you if you don't follow these certain rules, these certain beliefs, these certain precepts, these certain commandments, these certain protocols. If you don't do it our way, horrible things will happen to you. Terrible things could happen to you. So this goes back to the question about the fear of terrible things happening. Imagine if you were raised to believe that if you veered off of your original beliefs, the ones that were given to you by your family of origin or the church that you were raised in, and you have ventured off from there. That may still be the exact right place for so many people because they feel aligned with it. But you no longer feel aligned. So in that same way of recognizing your truth and knowing that it is your truth, and this person has found a spiritual home based on unity's principles. And unity's basic principles are unity, that we are all one. And because we are all one, we are all part of something greater than ourselves, which some people call God. Some people have other names. Most of the people in unity refer to God or to love. And a lot of different unity churches, they even have different ways that they express their basic principles. So even though there are 5 basic principles, you can find many writings about them. And they very much agree with many other principles based on love-based religions or spiritualities or beliefs around the world. So they are not only unique to unity, but there is something that Unity Church has adopted, has come through them. And it's about being one with everyone. And they believe in a Christ consciousness or a Christ nature. And others may believe in a Buddha nature or Mother nature or many other different variations of this. And they believe that as they align themselves with the one, that they are able to align their thoughts and their feelings, and through that, live a life based on love and manifest things in their life based on these teachings and based on love. Now, I am not reading these from the 5 principles of unity. I know that any of you and all of you, if you've asked these questions, you know them. And if you don't, you can Google them, you can look them up. But I'm going on the word base of unity and of oneness. So when the person says, how can I release? How can I release my fears? My fears based on past teachings, past religious teachings. Sometimes they might be past scientific teachings. They might be past moral teachings. They might be past ethical teachings. Any kind of a past teaching that I have evolved from and through to a different place in my life for me. How do I know that, get comfortable with that, and not feel controlled by those fears, especially in these scary times, in the times of COVID, in the times of the fires, in the times of the deep smoke that has lasted so long here in Oregon. For 10 days, we have been smoked in, right? How, with all of these really scary things happening, do I let go of the fear of the teachings that may be saying that these things are happening or happening to you because you didn't follow the original teachings that you were raised with, or because you've broken some rules, when you know that what you believe today is so different from that. So as we said before, that you feel the fear, You're human. Allow yourself to feel it. Some of those things that you first learned were at a very early age, and they're still embedded in there some way. And not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Some of the teachings you now believe fit with some of the teachings you used to believe. So embrace everything. Embrace everything that fits with what you now believe about alignment, about love, about unity, about the way the world works. Believe it because you know it. And seek out communion, community, and unity with those who have shared belief with you, because they will be your pod. They will help you in their guidance with these questions that you're coming up with. Find a prayer partner, find an elder, find a book, find a daily reading, something that reminds you of what you already know to be true. Once you do that, you are then filled with gratitude, because what you know to be true is very loving and full of gratitude. So once again, you take that gratitude and you take that love and you mix it and surround all the fears and the worries. Surround it with love, with gratitude, with everything that you believe and everything that unity is based on for you. And when that happens, you won't even need to release the fears. They will release their hold on you. Because the past is the past, the future is the future, and right here, right now, this is where you are filled with love and gratitude and compassion. Compassion for all who are suffering at this time, for all who have suffered through COVID, through the smoke, through the fires, through the hurricanes, through the snow, the blizzards, any weather patterns. You have compassion for those. And we surround ourselves with love, and we find ways to help others, whether it's through service, through prayer, through money, through spreading joy. We find ways to do that, and then we feel even more connected and even more love, and can do that even more. So that, my friend, is how you release your fears, especially the ones based on past events that are connecting with things happening in the present moment, but are about the future. Yes. Now for the next question, just a moment. Because we are in the last vestiges of the smoky air, it's still really dry here, so I'm hydrating a lot. And this is the last piece of paper in here, but not the last question or teaching. Okay, let's see what this one says. I want to acknowledge that one of the other things of percussion that you may hear in the background are big raindrops. Raindrops that are falling on my skylight. We have prayed and hoped for rain for 10 days to help the firefighters, to help put out and calm the fires, to help get the smokiness out of our air, to help our parched lands, to help our parched breath. So I want to just take a moment and give praise and gratitude and love for the rain that is falling at this time. And I'm trusting that it will be enough rain for now. Not too much, not too little, but just right. Okay, so the last question, last piece of paper in the bowl says, how do we forgive ourselves for perceived failure? How does one forgive oneself when we perceive that we have failed? So one of the main questions in here is perceived, right? It's right on that our failures, as well as our successes, are perceptions that we have in our mind about our behaviors and our actions based on judgment. That we are judging ourselves and judging our failures. And most people judge themselves more than they judge anyone else. So this is such a perfect question to end the night on, because it kind of summarizes all of those parts about fear, all the ways that we may have behaved out of fear, or not having the courage to behave in a way that we're aligned with. And when that happens, we make mistakes. And we might see those mistakes as failures. And as humans, we make mistakes all the time. But when we see them as failures, or when we're looking at our past and regretting something, we're seeing it as a failure. Instead of looking at it, not just with hindsight, but with kind sight. Looking at it with compassion. Looking at it with love. So again, we're looking at perceived failures from our past. We'll start there. They're in our past. We didn't know then what we know now. What we knew then was judgment and fear. And so we responded out of fear, even fearing that we'd be judged. Somehow the fear that we'd be judged was greater than the fear that would happen if we did whatever it was, for the lie that we told, or whatever it might have done, whatever we might have done, whatever we might have thought, however it was that we hurt ourselves, or that something that we did had an impact and hurt another person. So how do we look back on that with kind sight, knowing that each of us knows about our own self, that we did the best that we could in that moment with what we had. I believe Maya Angelou said, and then as we know better, we do better, right? So that's our job now. Now we're learning how to forgive ourselves. So that's the very first thing, to know better and do better. And when we look at the phrase that love, what's love for? Love is for giving. We give love away. And the more love that we give away, the more we are surrounded by love. So let's look at that phrase again. Love is forgiving. Love is for giving. Love is forgiving, right? So in order to forgive ourselves, once again, we surround ourselves, we imagine ourselves back, whether we were 2 years old, 20 years old, whether it was 5 years ago, yesterday, when we have something that we regret, we forgive ourselves by surrounding it with love, surrounding ourselves with love, knowing that we did the best that we could at that moment. And then part of forgiveness is learning. Now that we know, what would we do differently? How can we make amends? Is there someone that we need to make amends to? Often that first person is ourselves. We need to make our amends to judging ourselves so harshly and holding ourselves so tightly, and be able to surround ourselves with a great big hug. During COVID, we're the only ones that we can hug usually. So give yourself a big hug. Imagine hugging yourself as a little person, as a teenager, as a young adult, as an adult, as the age that you are now. Imagine hugging yourself and saying, it's okay. You did the absolutely best that you could. Forgive yourself. Surround it with love. Feel the relief. And then the question of what would love do comes to mind. What now? Would loving thoughts, loving actions, a loving perception, loving beliefs, what now would love do? What would love do for you? What would love do to make amends to whomever you may have hurt, even unknowingly? And allow yourself to move forward into the present moment and say, what would love do? How can I help others who may be stuck in that same judgment of themselves, in that same stuck place? How do I let people know what I've learned, what I know about loving myself, about forgiving myself, about letting go of fear, about not judging myself, and then doing it all again the next day because of our imperfections, right? So the reason they call this as a practice is because we're going to have many, 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 many opportunities all day, every day to be practicing loving ourselves deeply so that we can truly love humanity and love others and surround all of us with that loving energy that is grateful, that is forgiving, that is kind, that is compassionate, that seeks truth and has the courage to speak. So the last question is the bowl empty? Because there are no more papers in this bowl, is the bowl empty? Is this bowl empty? Well, that depends on your perception, right? Because in a certain wonderful way, this bowl is empty. It represents emptiness, that it is empty of judgment. It is empty of anything that is not love. It is empty of anything that does not build life and love. It is empty of all that no longer serves us. But yes, it is full. It is full of all that serves humanity. It is full of sound. It is full of love. It is full of wisdom. It is full of openness. 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 It is so open. It is open. Open to truth, open to love, open to wisdom, open to these experiences on the night of insight that we continue to have. And as I mentioned that, I want to remind you all that the night of insight is the third Thursday of every month. And you can find previous videos on my YouTube channel for Spiraling Toward Joy, or on the website Guidus, Guidess, Guidus of Happiness.com. I hope that you have enjoyed the receptivity of the teachings for tonight. I appreciate all of you being here, and I'm now going to stop the recording and chat with the people who are on live. Yeah.